Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sierra, and I'm a certified health coach with a background in psychology. If you've watched any of my previous videos, you know that I've lost over 40 pounds, and I've maintained that weight loss for multiple years now. You would also know that the key to my weight loss, as well as the key for anyone who wants to lose weight, is being in a caloric deficit, or in other words, burning more calories than you consume. However, I haven't yet gone over how to actually calculate a caloric deficit for yourself. So in this video, given how important it is to get this right, I wanted to talk about exactly how many calories you should be eating to lose weight. A step-by-step guide to calculating your caloric intake so that it's tailored to your unique goals and needs. This video is definitely going to provide a more thorough breakdown of how to calculate your calories for weight loss, and I highly recommend watching the entire thing for those of you who want a more complete understanding of the topic. But I'm also going to provide a really quick way of calculating your calories for weight loss that essentially takes into account everything I'm about to cover in this video and simplifies it into a super straightforward and practical equation. So without further ado, here is a step-by-step guide to calculating your ideal caloric intake for weight loss. So the first step to figuring out how many calories you need to lose weight is figuring out your maintenance calories. Or in other words, the calories you would need to maintain your current body weight. Another word for this is TDEE, which stands for Total Daily Energy Expenditure. Your TDEE is comprised of four main components. The first and usually largest component is your BMR, which stands for Basal Metabolic Rate. This is essentially the number of calories your body requires in order to perform basic life-sustaining functions while at rest. And it's really important for people to understand that this is usually the largest component because it means that you still require a significant number of calories even if you aren't performing any form of physical activity at all. The second component is EAT, which stands for Exercise Activity Thermogenesis, and essentially refers to the calories you burn from intentional exercise. This number will obviously vary quite a bit depending on how much exercise you do, but for the majority of cases, it usually only makes up a very small chunk of your TDEE, which explains why it's pretty much impossible to out-exercise a bad diet. Exercise just doesn't burn as many calories as people think. The third component is NEAT, or NEAT, which stands for Non-Exercise Activity Thermogenesis. And this refers to the calories you burn from any movement you engage in that isn't intentional exercise. This can include regular daily activities like walking and cleaning, but also less obvious movements such as talking with your hands or fidgeting. It's useful to know that the differences we see in individual metabolism can largely be attributed to the differences we see in NEAT. People who have naturally high metabolisms often tend to fidget more and simply engage in a lot more spontaneous activity, which leads to them having much higher levels of NEAT. The last component is TEF, which stands for Thermic Effect of Food, and refers to the calories you burn by simply digesting and processing the food you eat. This is a smaller component of your TDEE, but its impact can still be significant. It's important to note that not all foods have the same thermic effect. Foods high in protein and fiber have a higher thermic effect than foods high in fat and carbs because your body simply requires more energy to break them down. For example, the thermic effect of protein is estimated to be around 20 to 30%, while the thermic effect of fat is only estimated to be around 0 to 3%. This means that if you eat 100 calories from protein, you will end up burning 20 to 30 calories simply from digestion and end up with a net balance of 70 to 80 calories. But if those same 100 calories come from fat, you'll only end up burning up to 3 calories from digestion and will therefore end up with a net balance of 97 to 100 calories. That's a caloric increase of 17 to 30%. So on top of its importance for maintaining muscle mass and keeping you feeling full while in a caloric deficit, this is another reason why eating a high protein diet is super beneficial for weight loss. So these four components, including your basal metabolic rate, exercise activity thermogenesis, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, and the thermic effect of food or feeding, are what make up your total daily energy expenditure. But knowing these four components is more important for understanding rather than practicality. The only number you really need to be concerned with in order to figure out your calories for weight loss is your TDEE. So now that we have a basic understanding of what TDEE is, let's figure out how to actually calculate it. So as you would expect, everyone is going to require a different number of calories depending on their weight, age, gender, activity levels, etc. For example, the more you weigh, the higher your maintenance calories will be, because it simply takes more energy to move more body weight around. In addition, males tend to burn more calories than females, simply due to the natural differences in lean body mass. Thankfully for us, there have been several formulas developed over the years that have already figured all of this stuff out. These formulas take into account your weight, age, and gender in order to figure out your BMR, and then multiply your BMR by an activity factor in order to account for the calories you burn from physical activity. However, all of these formulas are pretty similar and there's no need to actually know them. You can simply use an online calculator that already has one of these formulas built into it. So let's do an example together now. All I'm going to do is go to Google and look up TDEE calculator. You can try out a few different online calculators and compare the results, but like I mentioned, they're pretty similar, so the specific calculator you choose to use isn't that important. So let's use the example of a female who's 30 years old, weighs 140 pounds, 5'5", and is lightly active. So as you can see, it will give you an estimate of her maintenance calories depending on what her activity level is. It can be kind of tricky to figure out exactly what activity level you'll fall into, but as I'll elaborate on later in the video, we're just going to use this as a starting point, so it doesn't really matter if you're a little off. For the most part though, people actually tend to overestimate their activity level, specifically people who are into lifting weights, because although they may exercise often, weightlifting simply doesn't burn that many calories. So if you weightlift on a regular basis, but you don't have an active job and you only do cardio maybe a couple times a week, you'll most likely fall into the light exercise category. But don't be afraid to pick a value in between some of these levels if you think it'd be more accurate for you. Now, there are a couple of really important things I want you to keep in mind. Number one, like I mentioned, is that these calculations are just estimates. They're designed to apply to the general population, but there can be drastic differences between individuals, even if they have the same weight, age, gender, and activity level. Due to hormonal, genetic, and much less obvious factors, you may have a much slower or faster metabolic rate than what these calculators suggest. So once again, these numbers shouldn't be taken too seriously and should only be used as a starting point. The other important thing to note is that these calculators give you an estimate of your average TDEE, not your TDEE on any one given day. The calories you burn from day to day are likely going to vary quite a bit, depending on how much exercise you do and what other activities you get up to in a day. But this isn't really worth worrying about, because as I've mentioned in previous videos, what truly matters for weight loss is your average caloric intake over time, not your caloric intake on any one day. So there's simply no reason to stress out about the day-to-day being different. Now that you have an estimate of your TDEE or maintenance calories, you now have an estimate of how many calories you would need to lose weight. Essentially, anything that's under this number. As long as you eat under this number, you will be in a caloric deficit, and you will therefore lose weight. But how far below this number do you want to be? Obviously, the lower your calories are, the faster you lose weight. But it's also true that the faster you lose weight, the more negative side effects and consequences you experience. For example, faster weight loss comes with more hunger, fatigue, and brain fog, a greater risk of muscle loss, a greater risk of other health issues, including hormonal issues and nutrient deficiencies, and a much greater risk of developing overeating and binge eating tendencies once the diet is over, which explains why most people can't maintain weight loss even if they're successful at losing it. In general, the slower you lose weight, the more enjoyable and sustainable it will be. But as the impatient human beings we are, we probably don't want to lose weight too slowly or delay getting to our goal for too long, because this can really hurt our confidence levels and our motivation. Losing weight too slowly can make us much more likely to quit before we end up seeing any results. So the ultimate key is being in enough of a caloric deficit to stay motivated and continue seeing results on a consistent basis, but not being in so much of a deficit that the experience ultimately becomes unenjoyable and unsustainable. And since everyone's needs and goals are different, the best rate of weight loss is also going to be different for everyone. The key formula to know is that there are roughly 3,500 calories in 1 pound of body fat. This means that you would need to eat roughly 3,500 calories less than your TDEE over a period of time in order to lose 1 pound of body fat. So what does this look like in practical terms? Well, it can look a lot of different ways. If you eat 500 calories less than your TDEE per day, for example, it will take you roughly 1 week to lose 1 pound of body fat, because 500 calories multiplied by 7 days in the week equals 3,500. 250 calories less per day equates to half a pound per week, or 1 pound over 2 weeks. 1,000 calories per day equates to 2 pounds in a week. 350 calories less per day equates to 0.7 pounds in a week, etc. You can essentially use this formula to figure out the caloric deficit required to lose any amount of weight over any given time period you want. So just say I want to lose 20 pounds over the course of 1 year. 20 pounds multiplied by 3,500 calories equals 70,000 calories. So that's a deficit of 70,000 calories over the course of the year. And since a year is 365 days, I would just need to divide 70,000 by 365 in order to figure out how many calories less I would need to eat every day, which is 190. So I would have to eat roughly 190 calories less per day in order to lose 20 pounds in a year. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's get to some recommendations. A lot of people go by a specific weight target or calorie target when recommending how much weight you should aim to lose. For example, a super common recommendation is to aim to lose roughly 1 to 2 pounds in a week, which, based on the formula I just outlined, would require a 500 to 1,000 calorie deficit per day. Now, this recommendation may be perfectly fine for some people, but overall, there's a massive problem with using an approach like this, and it's that 500 calories less for one person is going to mean something completely different for the next. For example, take a smaller female whose maintenance is 1,500 calories versus a heavier male whose maintenance is 3,500 calories. A 500 calorie deficit is more than 33% or 1/3 of the female's maintenance calories, but only 15% of the male's maintenance calories. Obviously, a 33% deficit is much larger than a 15% deficit. So even though they're both a deficit of 500 calories, the two deficits are not equivalent. And it gets even worse when you use the upper end of that recommendation. A 1,000 calorie deficit may be fine if you're really overweight or have a lot of weight to lose, but it's usually far too extreme if you're smaller or have less weight to lose, which, looking at my analytics and seeing that most of my viewers are female, probably applies to the majority of my audience. If your maintenance calories are anywhere between 1,500 and 2,000, which will be the case for a lot of females, and you cut your calories by 1,000, you would be eating between 500 and 1,000 calories per day. That's 50 to 66% below your maintenance calories, and is simply far too little for anyone who wants to lose weight in a healthy and sustainable way. So, rather than going by a specific number of calories or a specific amount of weight you want to lose per week, you want the equation you use to take into account your individual caloric needs and body size. And I believe that the best way to do this is by using a percentage of your maintenance calories. For example, 10% of your maintenance calories or 20% of your maintenance calories. And from everything I've learned and experienced over the years, this is how I would personally break down different rates of weight loss. A slow rate of weight loss would be a caloric deficit that is 10% or less of your maintenance calories. A moderate rate of weight loss would be a caloric deficit that is 10 to 30% of your maintenance calories. And a fast rate of weight loss would be a caloric deficit that is 30% or more of your maintenance calories. So, for example, for someone who has a TDEE of 2,000 calories, a deficit of 200 calories or less would be considered a slow rate of weight loss, so anywhere between 1,800 and just under 2,000 calories per day. A deficit of 200 to 600 calories would be considered a moderate rate of weight loss, so anywhere between 1,400 and 1,800 calories per day. And a deficit of 600 calories or more would be considered a fast rate of weight loss, so anywhere from 1,400 calories or less. So now that we've quantified that, the key is figuring out which rate of weight loss would be most appropriate for you. And in general, I believe that almost everyone would do best using a moderate rate of weight loss. So anywhere between 10 to 30%, but probably closer to the middle of that range. So if I had to make a blanket recommendation, I would say that a 20% caloric deficit would be best. This means that someone who has a TDEE of 2,000 calories, for example, would probably do best using a 400 calorie deficit per day, which equates to 1,600 calories per day, or a weight loss of 0.8 pounds per week. I believe that this is enough of a caloric deficit to stay motivated and continue seeing results on a consistent basis, while also still being enjoyable and sustainable. However, like I mentioned earlier, this will definitely vary between individuals. There are several different factors that may influence what rate of weight loss would be best for you. So here are some of the most important factors you should consider. The first major factor is how much weight you have to lose. The more weight you have to lose, the bigger your caloric deficit can be. This is because you usually have a lot more calories to work with, and also because it simply won't put as much stress on your body compared to someone who is closer to their ideal body weight. In fact, when you have an excess amount of weight and body fat to lose, losing weight quickly will actually take stress off of your body. So when you're really overweight or obese, you could easily get away with using a 30% caloric deficit or more, and could probably benefit from it. The second factor is whether you want to lose weight by a specific deadline. If you want to lose weight by a specific deadline, you can obviously adjust your rate of weight loss in order to hit that deadline. Just remember that the faster you lose weight, the more likely you are to rebound afterwards. This may not be a big deal if you only care about being a specific weight for a certain event or a very short period of time. Great examples of this include certain athletes such as wrestlers or powerlifters who need to make a specific weight class right before their competition. But if your goal is to lose weight and maintain it, which likely applies to most of you watching, you definitely don't need to put a very strict deadline on your weight loss journey. Losing weight at a slower or more moderate pace is always going to be better. Another crucial factor is your current lifestyle and the other goals and priorities you have going on in your life. Weight loss may be one goal of yours, but it's likely not the main goal or at least the only goal. And if being in a caloric deficit affects your ability to achieve the other important goals going on in your life, that's definitely something worth taking into account. For example, maybe you have a very physically demanding job, or maybe you're in school and you're studying for a very important exam. Since being in a caloric deficit can put a significant stress on your body and can really affect your ability to focus, this probably wouldn't be the best time to pursue rapid weight loss, or even weight loss in general. On the other hand, maybe you're currently taking a break from school or work and can get away with losing weight at a slightly faster rate. In general, the more stressed out you are, the smaller your caloric deficit should be. This isn't to say you can't lose weight in stressful situations or environments, but it's definitely going to be a lot more challenging. And it's just a matter of figuring out what you prioritize the most. You don't want to use your current circumstances as an excuse not to lose weight, but it sometimes does make the most sense to delay weight loss if you're in a super stressful situation, especially if the situation you're in is a temporary one. The last factor I'm going to mention is your personal history and experience with weight loss and dieting. For those of you who struggled with binge eating, yo-yo dieting, or any other disordered eating behaviors, you will likely always do better using an approach that's slower and more sustainable. So maybe even a 10% caloric deficit or less. More often than not, individuals with a history of disordered eating are extremely sensitive to the effects of weight loss and caloric restriction. And so the last thing you want to do is continue perpetuating the binge and restrict cycle or exacerbate any of the issues they have simply for the sake of weight loss. On the other hand, however, if you're more of an experienced dieter, you know what to expect, and have developed a really strong sense of discipline and really consistent habits around food, you could probably get away with being a little bit more aggressive with your caloric deficit if that's ultimately what you want to do. Overall, as I've tried to show, the best rate of weight loss isn't as simple as using one generalized formula for everyone. So really take the time to consider all of the factors I mentioned in this video before determining which rate of weight loss would be most appropriate for you. And remember that this likely will change over time as you progress along your weight loss journey. So now that you've figured out your maintenance calories and your ideal rate of weight loss in terms of a percentage, you can now figure out your ideal caloric intake for weight loss by simply taking that percentage off of your maintenance calories. For example, for someone who has a TDEE of 2,000 calories and an ideal rate of weight loss of 20%, their ideal caloric intake for weight loss would be 1,600 calories. Because 20% of 2,000 is 400 and 2,000 minus 400 is 1,600. As an alternative to taking a percentage off of your maintenance calories, however, you can use an even quicker calculation that is based on your body weight. This calculation is great because it's super simple, but it still gives you a value relative to your body size. Once again, these are just general guidelines, but I would say they work extremely well over 90% of the time. So in order to find your maintenance calories, simply take your body weight in pounds and multiply it by 14 to 16. Closer to 14 if you're older, female, or less active, and closer to 16 if you're younger, male, or more active. And in order to find your weight loss calories, you would simply multiply your body weight by 10 to 14, with body weight times 12 being the magic formula that will work extremely well for most people. Since 12 is 20% below 15, it matches perfectly with the 20% recommendation. Body weight times 10 is a really close approximation of your BMR, and for the most part, I don't recommend people going below their BMR. So as another general guideline, try to avoid going below body weight weight times 10 in calories. And it's really as simple as that. However, both of these calculations apply to your average caloric intake over time, and assume that you want to have a very strict and consistent calorie intake on a day-to-day basis. If you've watched my previous videos, however, you would know that I'm not necessarily a fan of using a very strict deficit or aiming for the exact same number of calories every single day. On top of this being unnecessary, it can also be unproductive for several reasons. The first main reason is that it's hard to fit an approach like this around your lifestyle. Not every day of our lives are going to look the same, and so it doesn't necessarily make the most sense for our nutrition to look the exact same either. The second main reason is that it can easily lead to all or nothing tendencies. This is something I talked about extensively in previous videos, so definitely check those videos out if you want a more detailed explanation of all or nothing behavior and how to start overcoming it. But it's essentially when not being absolutely perfect leads you to feeling like a failure and falling off of your plan completely, which is a very easy thing to do when you set super strict and rigid calorie targets for yourself. So rather than using a very strict deficit or aiming for the exact same number of calories every single day, here are a couple of other approaches you can consider using. The first is aiming for a calorie range rather than a super specific target. If you determine that your ideal caloric intake for weight loss is 1600 calories, for example, you could set yourself a calorie range of say 1500 to 1700 calories per day, or maybe even 1400 to 1800. Even just this little bit of wiggle room and flexibility can turn an unsustainable approach into a sustainable one and prevent you from falling into all or nothing tendencies. The second approach you could incorporate is using some form of intentional calorie cycling, where you plan to eat more on some days and less on other days. As I've mentioned countless times already, weight loss isn't determined on how many calories you eat in any one given day, but rather is determined by your average calorie intake over time. This means that your calories can vary on a day-to-day basis, and you can plan to do this in advance in a way that best suits your lifestyle and preferences. Once again, imagine someone who needs to eat 1600 calories per day in order to lose weight. If they know that they prefer to eat a lot more on the weekends compared to the weekdays, they can incorporate this preference into their plan. They could plan to eat 1400 calories from Monday to Thursday, which would give them 800 more calories to work with on the weekends. So even if they ate 2000 calories on both Friday and Saturday, their average caloric intake for the week would still be 1600. Same average caloric intake, but set up in a much more enjoyable and sustainable way. You could also plan to do this on a week-to-week basis in the form of diet breaks. Weight loss is a journey that happens over a long period of time, but this doesn't mean that you have to do it all in one go. If you're going on vacation, for example, or simply feel like you could benefit from having a physical or psychological break from dieting, it may be a good idea to deliberately bring your calories up to maintenance for that period of time. Point is, what matters most for weight loss is your average caloric intake over time, not your caloric intake on any one given day. And so as long as your average caloric intake over time equates to a caloric deficit, you can essentially choose to distribute your calories any way you like. However, this is also something that will vary drastically depending on the individual. Some people will do better with more flexibility and variance from day to day, while some people will actually do a lot better with more structure and more consistency. The key here is finding the balance between structure and flexibility that works best for you, your lifestyle, and your preferences. So the last step to figuring out your calories for weight loss is tracking your progress and adjusting your caloric intake over time. Unfortunately, this is the step that requires a little bit more time and energy, but it's absolutely essential. And there are two primary reasons for this. The first reason is that you likely won't get your calories right the first time. As I mentioned before, TDEE calculations are just estimates. They're designed to apply to the general population, but each individual has their own unique metabolic rate. And so you actually need to track your calories over time to determine if your calories are truly right for you. And although it may take some time and effort to collect the data, once you have the data, all it takes is some basic math to figure out exactly how many calories you're burning. Using the knowledge that there are roughly 3,500 calories in 1 pound of body fat, you can easily determine whether you're in a deficit, at maintenance, or in a surplus, and by exactly how much, simply based on how your weight has been changing over time. For example, if you find that you're losing weight at a rate of 1 pound per week, you would know that you're in an average caloric deficit of 500 calories per day. And if your average caloric intake was, say, 1,500 calories over that period of time, you would know that your true maintenance calories for that period of time were 2,000. And again, you can essentially do this with any given period of time. If I lost 0.8 pounds over 10 days, for example, I would know that I was in a total caloric deficit of 2,800 calories over that period of time, since 0.8 times 3,500 is 2,800, which equates to 280 calories over a 10-day period. Since since 2800 divided by 10 is 280. So in order to figure out my true maintenance calories for that period, I would just add 280 calories to whatever my average calorie intake was for that period of time. Now, once again, there are a couple really important things to note about this. The first important thing to note, which is something I've talked about before, is that you're probably not going to be super accurate with your tracking, but that's totally okay. The goal isn't necessarily to be super accurate, because even if you're not super accurate, the simple act of tracking in itself is what's going to allow you to make reliable adjustments to your food intake over time. For example, say you set out to eat 1500 calories per day and end up losing 1 pound per week. Whether you're truly eating 1500 calories or not, you still know you're in roughly a 500 calorie deficit. Maybe you're actually eating 1700 calories per day. But does this really matter? I would say no, because whether you're going from 2000 to 1500 calories or 2200 to 1700 calories, you're still reducing your food intake and putting yourself in more of a deficit either way. As long as you continue eating similar foods and keep your method of tracking relatively consistent over time, you know you'll be in a deficit when you at least aim for 1500 calories, even if that's not what you're truly eating. The second important thing to note is that the more data you have, the more accurate this estimate will be. And this is because your true body weight often takes a long period of time to accurately reflect the changes you make to your calories. As an example, people often lose a large amount of weight really quickly when they first start dieting, but this is mainly due to fluctuations in water weight rather than actual body fat. Carbohydrates in particular cause your body to store a lot more water. So when you lower your carbohydrates, you end up losing a lot of water weight. This is mainly why low-carb diets cause people to lose a lot of water weight really quickly. It's not actual body fat. And you may even lose a few pounds on the scale when you start dieting simply due to less actual food being in your system. Say you end up losing 5 pounds in your first week of dieting, which isn't too uncommon. If we strictly go by the math, this would require being in a 2500 calorie deficit on average per day, which for most people wouldn't even be possible. So clearly, those 5 pounds do not reflect true fat loss. It's also really common to hit a weight loss plateau, where you're on point with your calories, but your weight doesn't budge, for maybe even a week or more. But again, this doesn't necessarily mean that you weren't in a deficit or you didn't lose any body fat during that period of time. Sometimes the body just is holding on to more water weight due to stress, hormones, and several other factors, which can mask the true progress you're making. Put simply, weight loss is not linear. So instead of going by the day or even the week, the best thing to do is track your progress over a much longer period of time. I would personally wait at least a month or two before making any definite conclusions about your metabolism. This may seem a little bit tedious, but it's definitely worth the effort, especially in the beginning. Because once you get a better understanding of your metabolism and how it relates to the general population, you'll have that information forever. And so you won't need to be so meticulous in the future. So the second major reason it's really important to track your progress over time is that your metabolism will actually decrease as you lose weight. Like I mentioned earlier, one of the main factors that determine your maintenance calories is how much you weigh. The more you weigh, the higher your maintenance calories will be, because it simply requires more energy to move more body weight around. And so the opposite is also true. The less you weigh and the more weight you lose, the lower your maintenance calories will be. Your body also tends to conserve more energy as you lose weight, which slows your metabolic rate even more. It's definitely not as drastic as some people claim, but depending on how much weight you lose, your new maintenance calories may be quite a bit lower than they were before you lost weight. And so it's definitely worth tracking your progress over time to see when you need to make some adjustments. A lot of people will recommend to reduce your calories every single week as you lose weight, but I really don't think that this is necessary. Like I said, progress can take multiple weeks to show up on the scale anyways, and it's simply impractical to constantly be adjusting your caloric intake. In reality, you should be able to keep your calories fairly consistent as you lose weight. It's better to lose weight at a faster rate in the beginning and at a slower rate as you get closer to your goal anyway. So by not changing your calorie intake too much, this will naturally take care of that. The same number of calories will put you in a larger deficit in the beginning and a smaller deficit over time, simply due to your metabolism slowing down a bit. If you're really overweight and have a lot of weight to lose though, you will likely need to make a few significant decreases to your calories throughout the weight loss process. But because you're going to be dieting for a much longer period of time, it still won't be something you need to do super frequently. And that's essentially everything you need to know. To recap, the first step is to figure out an estimate of your maintenance calories, or TDEE, either using an online calculator or the body weight times 15 calculation I provided. Then figure out your ideal rate of weight loss, either slow, moderate, or fast, and use that to calculate your goal calorie intake, which will often be a 20% reduction from your maintenance calories, or somewhere around your body weight times 12. Keeping in mind that this number refers to your average calorie intake over time, not necessarily your calorie intake on any one given day. And lastly, you should track your progress and adjust your calorie intake over time depending on your weight loss results. Now, of course, you can implement the information I talked about in this video and choose to pursue a weight loss journey all on your own. But I know that unfortunately, it's a lot easier said than done. It's one thing to know what to do, but another thing entirely to actually get yourself to do it and do it consistently. So if you feel like you could benefit from receiving any extra help with figuring out a weight loss plan that will work for you, or simply feel like you would benefit from having the extra support and accountability, that's exactly what my health coaching services are here for. My goal is not only to help you lose weight and achieve the body and lifestyle you've always wanted, but also to provide you with the knowledge, skills, and resources you need in order to sustain those results for the rest of your life. So if this sounds like something you're interested in, definitely don't hesitate to shoot me an email or reach out to me on Instagram. And with that out of the way, I would like to thank you all so much for watching. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel so you never miss any of my future videos. See you guys soon!